My name is Clara. I am 31 years old, and the night I opened my door to him was the night my old life ended. I did not know it at that moment. I only knew that I was tired, that the rain was loud outside, and that the sound of his knock made my heart jump in a way I could not explain. When I pulled the handle and the door moved, I saw him standing there in the dark hallway, his hair wet, his shirt clinging to his body. His eyes fixed on mine like he had been waiting for me for a very long time. I should have asked him why he came so late. I should have closed the door and gone back to my quiet, empty living room. Instead, I stepped aside and said the words that still haunt me today. You can come in. That simple sentence was the beginning of everything I am about to confess. As he walked past me, a cold wind entered with him, making the small lamp in the corner flicker. The apartment smelled like coffee and dust, like every night after a long day at work. He looked around slowly, as if he was trying to memorize every detail of my life in a few seconds. I watched him take in the old couch, the bookshelf full of worn paperbacks, the photo frames on the wall. I felt naked, even with clothes on, because my home showed more about me than my words ever did. He turned to me and gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you for letting me in, Clara," he said. My name in his mouth sounded soft, but there was something else under it, something heavy that made my stomach tighten. I told him it was fine, that it was just for a short time, that I was only helping a friend. I did not know yet that friends do not leave scars like the ones he would leave on me. He took off his wet jacket and placed it carefully on the back of a chair, like he was trying to be polite. I walked to the bathroom and grabbed a towel, trying to calm my breathing, telling myself that this was just a normal visit, that I was overreacting. When I came back, he was standing near my favorite picture on the wall, the one of me and my mother in a small garden, both of us smiling at the camera like life was kind and safe. He was so close to the frame that I felt a strange need to protect it, handed him the towel and said he could sit on the couch. He dried his hair slowly, his eyes all the time moving between the picture and my face. "You still miss her, don't you?" he asked. His question cut through me. I did not remember telling him much about my mother, but somehow he knew exactly where to press. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment, and sat on the other end of the couch, keeping a careful distance that felt both safe and useless at the same time. The silence between us grew thick. The only sounds were the soft buzz of the old refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant noise of cars passing outside. I tried to act calm, but something in me was restless, like a small animal trapped in a cage. I asked him why he had come. It was late, the weather was bad, and we were not that close anymore. He looked down at his hands, rubbed the towel between his fingers, and then raised his eyes to mine with a seriousness that made me feel cold. "Because I had nowhere else to go," he said, "and because there is something I need to tell you tonight." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but every word reached me like a slow warning. I swallowed hard and asked what it was. My heart started to beat faster, and I could feel a thin layer of sweat forming on my back, even though the room was not warm. He moved a little closer on the couch, not enough to touch me, but close enough that I could feel his presence like a weight. "I have been thinking about you for a long time, Clara," he began. "Longer than you know." His eyes did not leave mine, and I felt like I could not look away, like he had trapped me in that moment. He spoke about how I had always been kind, about how I listened when no one else did, about how I opened my door to him now when everyone else would have told him to go away. Each word sounded like a compliment, but instead of feeling warm, I felt smaller and smaller, like he was wrapping invisible strings around me. Then he said the words I did not expect to hear that night: "I love you." The room seemed to tilt for a second. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Love. It should have been a beautiful word, but in that instant it felt wrong, heavy, out of place, like a puzzle piece pushed into the wrong picture. I stood up quickly, almost too fast, and my hand brushed against the coffee table, making a small glass shake. I told him he should not say that. I told him he was confused, that he did not know what he was feeling, that we were just... I did not even know what we were. Old friends? Something unfinished from the past? People who shared memories but not a future? He rose to his feet too, slowly, and took one step toward me. I took one step back. My back met the wall near the door, the same door I had opened to him not long before. For a brief second, I wished I could go back in time, back to the moment when his hand was still raised to knock and my hand had not yet touched the handle. "Clara, listen," he said, his voice firmer now. "I am not confused. You are. You think you want to be alone, but you don't. You need someone who will never leave." His words wrapped around my fear like a tight rope. I realized then that this was not a simple confession. It was something much darker, something that wanted to stay, whether I wanted it or not. I looked at the door behind me and understood the cruel truth that would follow me for years. The biggest mistake was not when he spoke. It was when I let him in. I did not know what to do, so I kept my back against the door, hoping it would somehow protect me from the person standing in front of me. The air between us felt heavy, and my breath was uneven, as if my body already understood the danger that my mind was still trying to deny. He took another slow step toward me, his eyes never leaving mine, and I pressed my palms against the wood behind me as if I could disappear into it. I told him again that he needed to leave, that this was not right, that he was making me uncomfortable. But he only tilted his head a little, like he was studying me, like my fear was something he could read and use. He said he was sorry if he scared me, but he could not walk away now, not after everything he had held inside for so long. His voice was soft, but it carried something sharp, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to move to the side, to step away from the door, but he placed his hand on the wall next to me, not touching me, but blocking my path. His hand was inches from my shoulder, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. I froze. He asked why I was acting like he was dangerous. I wanted to scream that I felt unsafe, that everything about this moment felt wrong, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. Instead, I whispered that I needed space. He laughed quietly like I had said something sweet, not something desperate. "Space," he repeated. "You give your heart to people who break it. You give your time to people who forget you. But you push away the one person who truly cares." His words cut deeper because they were twisted versions of things I once believed, and he knew that. He knew exactly where to strike. When he finally stepped back, I felt air return to my lungs. I opened the door a little, but his hand moved fast, pushing it closed before I could react. The door clicked with a dull sound that echoed inside me. I told him he needed to leave. My voice broke, but I tried to look strong, even though my hands were shaking. He stared at me in silence for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw something change in his expression. His eyes softened, but not in a comforting way. It was a softness that made me more afraid, like he had reached a decision inside himself. "I'm not here to hurt you, Clara," he said. "I just want you to understand that I cannot let you go again." Again. The word felt wrong on my skin. I did not know what he meant. I asked him what he was talking about, but he just smiled, a slow, sad smile that confused me even more. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The rain outside was falling hard, hitting the glass like small fingers tapping with urgency. The streetlights were blurred behind the storm, turning the world outside into a dark, trembling painting. He stood there for a moment, watching the rain, and I used that second to breathe, to think, to gather whatever courage I had left. I stepped closer to the door again and placed my hand on the lock. I did not turn it, but I needed to feel it there, like a small promise that I still had control over something. When he turned back to me, his face looked tired, almost broken. He said he did not want to fight, that he came because he trusted me. He said he had been holding on to something for years, something that connected us in ways I did not remember. I told him I did not understand, that we were not that close, that he was making this bigger than it was. He shook his head slowly, like he knew a truth I had forgotten. Then he said something that made my heart stop for a moment. "You do not remember the night at the hospital," he said. My breath caught, my legs weakened. There was a part of my life I rarely talked about, a night filled with loss and confusion. A night where everything felt blurred, where faces passed by like shadows. I remembered noise, pain, cold hands, the smell of alcohol and metal. But I did not remember him, not clearly. I felt dizzy for a second, as if the room was moving. I asked him what he meant. He stepped closer again, but this time slower, almost careful. "I was there," he whispered. I saw you cry. I saw you beg for a miracle that never came. I held your hand when you thought no one was watching. I felt something inside me twist sharply, a mix of fear and something else I could not name. I asked him why he never told me, why he appeared now, why he waited. His eyes filled with something that looked like pain, but I could not trust it. Because you were broken, he said softly. Because you needed time to heal before you could see me. His words fell like cold water on my skin. My mind tried to understand, to connect pieces that did not fit. I told him that night was years ago, that he could not base his life on something I barely remembered. He looked at me like I had stabbed him with a secret. It was not just a night for me, he said. It was the moment I knew you were the one person I could never walk away from. My hands trembled again and I placed one on the wall to steady myself. He took a slow step toward me and the floor creaked under his weight. I could hear the sound of the rain, louder now, almost angry. I knew then that this was not just a visit, not just a confession. It was the beginning of something dark, something that had been growing inside him for years. And I felt the terrible truth rising inside me like a shadow. I had let him in, but I did not know how to make him leave. I felt something inside me break when I saw the way he looked at me, like he had lived inside my memories longer than I ever lived in them. The rain hit the window harder, louder, as if the night wanted to warn me again. I told him he should sit down, hoping distance would help me think, but he stayed where he was, watching me with an intensity that made my skin feel too small for my body. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, pretending I needed water, pretending I had control. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to move, step by step, the way someone walks in a dream they want to wake from. When I reached the counter, I placed my hands flat on the cold surface and tried to breathe. I heard him behind me, not moving, but present, like a shadow attached to my back. I filled a glass with water just to keep my hands busy. The sound of the tap felt too loud in the silence of the room. When I turned around, he had moved closer without making a sound. He stood at the edge of the kitchen, blocking the way out. His wet hair had dried a little, falling messily over his forehead, and his clothes were still damp from the storm. He asked if I remembered talking to someone that night in the hospital. I told him I remembered almost nothing, that the pain had taken everything from me. He nodded slowly, like he expected that answer, but his eyes darkened in a way that made me uneasy. I never forgot you, he said. Not for one day. His words felt heavy, too heavy for a memory I barely had. I tried to smile, to be polite, to calm things down, but my lips did not move the way I wanted. He stepped further into the kitchen, and I took a step back. My hip bumped against the counter behind me, trapping me in place. He said he had watched me from a distance for years, making sure I was safe, making sure I was not alone. My heart stopped for a second. Safe. Alone. Those were words I used only in my head, not things I ever said to him. I asked him how he knew where I lived. He shrugged a little, like it was nothing. You forgot, Clara, he answered. But I never did. My fingers tightened around the glass of water. I felt a thin line of fear climb up my spine like cold fingers. I told him he should go home, that we could talk another day when things were clearer. He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. There is no other day, he said quietly. There is only tonight. For a moment I felt the room tilt again. My throat tightened, and the cold air felt like needles in my lungs. I tried to move past him, but he placed his hand on the counter near my side, blocking me again. My heart was beating too fast, and I was sure he could hear it. I whispered his name, hoping it would bring him back to himself. But instead he leaned closer, his voice low and almost broken. You do not understand what you mean to me. I tried to tell him that he was scaring me, but my voice was stuck between fear and disbelief. He reached out slowly, touching my arm with the tips of his fingers. I flinched, and he pulled his hand back as if he was hurt by my reaction. I would never harm you, he said, but the way he said it made my knees shake. He took a breath, long and shaky, and stepped back for the first time since entering the kitchen. I felt air return to my chest. He ran his hand through his hair, looked down, and whispered something I almost did not hear. I love you too much. I set the glass down on the counter, afraid it would fall from my trembling hand. I told him he needed help, that maybe he should talk to someone, that this was not healthy, not real, not the way love was supposed to feel. He laughed softly, but it was a sad, strange laugh. "This is the only real thing in my life," he said. "You are the only real thing." I tried to walk past him again, slower this time, careful not to startle him, but he moved with me, mirroring me like a shadow. The living room light flickered again as the storm outside grew stronger, and a sudden thunderclap made me jump. He used that moment to step closer, so close that I had to turn my head to avoid looking directly into his eyes. He whispered that he could not lose me again. Again. The word hit me like a bruise. I asked him what he meant, but he only shook his head like it was a secret he was not ready to share. I reached for the lamp near the couch and turned it off, pretending I was trying to calm the atmosphere. But the truth was, I wanted the darkness to hide my fear. In the dim light, his face softened, but the softness only made him feel more unpredictable. He sat on the couch suddenly, his hands covering his face, his shoulders rising and falling with his breath. For a moment he looked human, fragile even. But I did not move closer. I stood still, watching him from the other side of the room, unsure if he was breaking down or preparing to reveal something worse. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. Not with tears of sadness, but with something deeper, something like desperation. He said he had been waiting for the right moment to come to me, that he had watched my life change, watched me try to smile again, watched me pretend the past did not hurt me anymore. He said he had promised himself that one day, when I was ready, he would tell me everything. I felt a cold shiver travel down my arms. I asked him how long he had been watching me. He did not answer right away. He wiped his face with his sleeve and whispered, "Long enough to know I cannot let you disappear." My legs felt weak again, and I leaned on the wall to steady myself. I told him I needed air, needed space, needed to think. Then I walked toward the balcony door. I hoped he would let me. I hoped he would stay on the couch. But I heard his footsteps behind me, slow and steady, following me like a shadow that refused to stay behind. When I stepped onto the balcony, the cold rain hit my face, and for the first time that night, I felt something that looked like freedom. But when I turned, he was already there, standing in the doorway, blocking the way back inside. The storm behind me and the darkness in front of me made my heart drop. That was the moment I understood something I should have known. The moment I opened the door, he did not come to visit me. He came because he believed I belonged to him. The wind pushed the rain across my face, cold and sharp, but it felt softer than the fear that was growing inside my chest. I stood on the balcony, holding the metal railing with numb fingers, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. A few hours earlier, my home had been a quiet place, a safe place. Now it felt like the walls had closed in around me and the only open space was the storm outside. I heard him step forward, his shoes making a soft sound against the floor. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on the wet street below, the cars moving slowly through the rain, the people rushing under umbrellas, living their own lives without knowing that mine was falling apart above them. He said my name softly, almost like a prayer, swallowed hard, my throat tight, and asked him again to leave. My voice was small, barely louder than the rain, but I forced it out. He said he could not go, not until we talked, not until I understood him. I felt the old fear return, crawling under my skin like cold smoke. I wanted to run, scream, call someone, anyone, but my body felt frozen. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him standing in the doorway. He looked different in the weak light coming from inside the apartment, like the shadows painted a new version of him, one I had never seen before, one I wished I had never met. He walked toward me slowly, his steps careful, as if he was afraid of breaking the thin line between us. He said he never wanted to scare me. He said he only wanted to protect me. Protect me from what? I almost asked, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. He reached the edge of the balcony, just a few feet away from me, and rested his hand on the doorframe. The storm brushed against both of us, the wind catching the ends of his shirt. I stepped farther out into the rain, trying to keep the distance between us. But the balcony was small, and I could feel the wall behind me closing in. He told me he remembered the night at the hospital clearly. The sounds, the fear in my eyes, the way I held my breath when the doctor shook his head. I felt tears rise in my eyes at the memory I wished I could erase. I asked him why he was telling me this now, why he waited so long. He looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. "Because I thought time would make you see me," he said. "Because I thought one day, your heart would remember mine." My stomach turned. I whispered that he was wrong, that we did not share the same past, that whatever he believed was not real, but my voice trembled too much to sound strong. He took another step toward me and I pressed my back harder against the wall. My breath came out shaky and the rain felt colder, heavier. He said he had watched me break after that night, watched me try to rebuild myself piece by piece, watched me fall and stand again. I felt a cold shiver move through my whole body. Watched me. The words echoed in my mind. I asked him how long he had been watching me, but he only smiled in a way that made the air around us feel darker. I asked again, louder this time, my voice breaking. His smile faded, and he whispered, "Long enough." I felt something sharp twist inside my chest. I asked him if he had followed me. He didn't deny it. He looked at me with eyes that were too honest, too open, as if the truth was the only thing he could give me. I felt my knees weaken, and I grabbed the railing with both hands. The cold metal steadied me, but only a little. I told him this was wrong, that he needed to stop, that he needed to leave me alone. For the first time that night, his face changed. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. He said he was tired of being alone, tired of waiting, tired of watching me from a distance while other people hurt me. He said he would not allow that anymore. The wind blew harder, sending drops of rain across his face. He looked almost peaceful standing there, but his voice said another truth. He said he had tried to stay away, but he could not. He said he had tried to forget me, but he failed. He said he had tried to move on, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw me. His words wrapped around me like a net, pulling tighter and tighter. My breath shook as I whispered that this wasn't love. He shook his head slowly, like he was disappointed I couldn't see what he saw. "You think love is soft," he said, "but real love is strong. Real love does not leave. Real love stays." My heart beat so fast it hurt. I told him again that he needed to go, but he stepped even closer, and I felt panic rising in my chest like fire. I reached behind me and touched the sliding glass door, hoping I could slip inside, but he moved faster, blocking the entrance with his body. I felt the first tear fall from my eye, warm even in the cold rain. I told him I was scared. He closed his eyes for a second, breathing deeply, and when he opened them again, there was something softer there, something almost gentle. "I don't want you to be scared," he said quietly. "I just want you to understand that you are mine." The sound of those words hit me harder than the storm. I shook my head, stepping sideways, my hand sliding across the wet railing, but he moved with me, matching my pace, his eyes following every small motion I made. I felt cornered, trapped between the wall, the storm, and the man who believed he had a right to me. I opened my mouth to speak, to plead, to yell. I did not know what, but before I could say anything, he whispered something that froze every part of me. "I came tonight because someone else is looking for you too." The moment those words left his mouth, the world around me seemed to stop. The rain, the wind, the distant noise of the city, all of it faded into a heavy, painful silence that wrapped itself around my chest. I stared at him, my fingers tightening around the cold railing until they hurt. Someone else is looking for me. The thought echoed inside my mind like a slow, terrifying drumbeat. I asked him who he meant, but my voice was barely a whisper. He didn't answer at first. He looked past me, out into the dark street below, as if he could see something hiding in the shadows that I couldn't. I stepped away from the railing, but he moved with me, staying close enough that I felt the heat of his body even with the cold rain around us. I repeated the question, louder this time, my voice shaking with fear and frustration. He finally turned his eyes back to mine. His expression had changed again. There was worry there now, real worry, mixed with something like anger. He said he didn't want to tell me like this, not while I was upset, not while the storm was screaming against the building, but it was too late for soft words. I told him to say it. Whatever it was, I needed to hear it. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his wet hair. He said a man had been asking about me for weeks. A man who came to his work one afternoon with a picture of me. A man who said he needed to find me because I had something he wanted. My heart dropped, and my mind started spinning. I asked what picture he meant. He looked at me for a long moment before stepping back inside the apartment. I stayed frozen on the balcony, the rain sliding down my skin, my breath turning cold in the night air. When he returned, he was holding my old photo, the one of me standing on the bridge near the hospital years ago, wearing a blue coat, staring at the water like it could answer my pain. He held the picture carefully between his fingers, as if it was proof of something dark. I stepped forward and grabbed it from his hand, my fingers trembling. I hadn't seen that photo in years. I didn't even know anyone else had a copy. I told him I had lost the original a long time ago. He nodded. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I didn't understand how he had one." A cold shiver ran through me. I asked him who the man was, what he looked like, what he wanted from me. He said the man didn't give much information, only that he needed to find me soon. And the worst part, the man had known my name. My full name. I backed away from him, holding the wet picture against my chest. My thoughts raced. There were things from my past I never talked about, people I never mentioned. Mistakes I tried to bury under years of silence. I felt a familiar ache rise inside me, one I hoped had died long ago. I whispered that this didn't make sense, that no one should be looking for me. He stepped closer again, but this time he didn't try to touch me. His voice softened. He said he didn't know who the man was, but he didn't trust him. He said the man's eyes were cold, like someone who had made a decision he wouldn't change. He said the man had been waiting for something. Waiting for me. I shook my head, trying to push away the panic that was growing inside me like a storm. I told him he was lying, that he was making this up to scare me, to control me, to keep me close. He looked hurt for a moment, really hurt, but he didn't get angry. He just said he wished he was lying. He wished this was a story he invented. He said he came tonight not to trap me, but to warn me. But his warning only made the fear worse. I felt trapped between two storms, one standing in front of me and one hiding somewhere in the shadows of my past. I walked back into the apartment, my wet clothes dripping onto the floor, my heart beating like it was trying to escape my body. He followed me slowly, watching every step I took. I told him to sit on the couch. He didn't move at first, but then he obeyed, lowering himself into the same spot where he had confessed his feelings earlier. I stood near the window, gripping the picture so tightly the edges bent between my fingers. I asked him again to tell me everything from the beginning. He nodded and rested his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together as if he was praying. He said the man had come 3 times, each time with the same photo. Each time with those same questions, each time more impatient than the last. I asked him why the man came to him and not to me. He looked away for a moment, shame touching his face. "Because he thought I was close to you," he said softly. "Because he thought you and I were... something." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't want this stranger to know anything about me. I didn't want my past to reach into my present. I didn't want any part of this nightmare to be real. But then he said something that made my whole body feel cold. He said the man left a message he didn't want to say earlier because he knew it would break me. I stepped closer, barely breathing. He looked up at me with eyes full of fear and whispered the words that would change everything that came after. He said he's coming back soon, and he won't leave without you. When he said those words, something inside me went still, like my heart refused to beat for a moment. The room felt colder, the silence heavier, and the only sound I could hear was the rain hitting the window in sharp, fast drops. I stared at him, trying to understand if he was telling the truth or if this was some part of the twisted story he had built inside his mind. But the fear in his eyes was real, too real for him to invent. I felt a tremor move through my body, starting in my hands and spreading to my legs. I walked backward until I reached the wall, needing something solid behind me because everything else felt like it was falling apart. I asked him why he hadn't told me sooner. My voice came out rough, almost broken. He looked down at his hands, as if searching for an answer in the lines of his palms. He said he didn't want to scare me, didn't want to lose me, didn't want to push me farther away than I already was. I felt anger rise in my chest, mixing with the fear, making my breathing uneven. I told him he had no right to hide something like this from me. He nodded slowly, accepting my words like a punishment he believed he deserved. He whispered that he thought he could handle it on his own, that he could keep the man away, that he could protect me silently. Protect. The word felt heavy, like it was tied to everything he had done and everything he wanted from me. I walked to the small table near the window and placed the wet photo there. The paper made a soft, sad sound as it touched the wood. I stood there for a moment, staring at my younger self frozen in time, unaware of the storm that would follow years later. I asked him what the man wanted from me. He shook his head and said he didn't know, but his voice shook as he said it. I pressed him, needing something, anything that made sense. He said the man didn't look like someone searching for a lost friend or a distant memory. He looked like someone searching for a debt that had never been paid. I turned away from the photo and looked at him again. He was sitting on my couch, shoulders tense, his fingers moving nervously against each other. I could see now the conflict inside him, the part of him that wanted to protect me, and the part of him that wanted to keep me for himself. Both parts were dangerous in different ways. I took a slow breath and asked him what the man had said exactly. His jaw tightened, his voice lowered. He said the man told him that some things don't stay buried forever, that some stories return to finish what they started. My stomach twisted painfully at the words. They sounded familiar, like something from a past I tried to erase. I walked toward the kitchen again, needing space to think, needing something to hold on to. My fingers brushed the edge of the counter and I leaned against it, closing my eyes. Memories I never wanted to see again began to push through the cracks of my mind faces. I tried to forget. Nights filled with fear. Choices I made when I was younger and lost. I felt myself slipping back into that old darkness. Before I could stop it, a small sound escaped my lips, something between a breath and a tremble. He heard it. He stood up from the couch and took a step toward me. I opened my eyes and told him not to come closer. He froze in place, his hands slightly raised as if calming a frightened animal. He said he didn't want to hurt me. I told him that he already had. The words hit him hard. I could see it in his face, the way his expression fell, the way the light in his eyes dimmed. He looked at me like I was his entire world and he had just discovered it was built on sand. He whispered my name, but I shook my head. I couldn't listen to him say it again. I asked him if he knew when the man would come back. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he said the man had promised to return within a week. A week. The word echoed inside me like a countdown. I felt a wave of panic crash over me, sudden and overwhelming. I pushed myself away from the counter and walked quickly to the living room, needing to move, needing to breathe, needing to escape the invisible hands pulling at me from every direction. I reached the center of the room and stopped, wrapping my arms around myself. I didn't know who to fear more, the man searching for me or the man who refused to let me go. I told him I needed to be alone, needed to think, needed space. He shook his head slowly, and the way he looked at me made my heart race again. He said he couldn't leave me like this. He said it wasn't safe. He said the storm outside wasn't the only danger waiting for me. I walked toward the door, my hand reaching for the handle. I didn't want him there. I didn't want his voice or his fear or his obsession inside my home anymore. I told him again to leave. He didn't move. I raised my voice. I told him again. He stood up, his body tense, his eyes locked on mine. He said he would go, but he wouldn't go far. He said he would stay close just in case the man came looking for me sooner than expected. He said he wouldn't let anything happen to me. I wanted to yell that he was the thing happening to me, but the words died in my throat. He walked toward the door slowly, watching me with a look that felt like a goodbye and a promise at the same time. Before he stepped out, he turned back and whispered something that made my whole body freeze. "You're not alone in this, Clara. Whether you want me or not, I'm not letting you disappear." Then he stepped out into the hallway and closed the door behind him, leaving me in the silent, dark room with only the storm and my fear for company. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, knowing that whatever waited for me outside wasn't just coming, it was already on its way. When the door closed behind him, the apartment fell into a silence so deep it felt almost alive. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the wood that separated me from the man who said he was trying to protect me, and from the world outside that suddenly felt too large and too dangerous to face. The storm had softened a little, but the rain still tapped against the window like fingers trying to get in. My clothes were still wet and cold against my skin, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My thoughts were loud, louder than the storm, louder than my heartbeat, louder than the fear pressing against my ribs. I walked slowly toward the photo on the table, the one he brought me, the one I didn't know existed anymore. My younger face looked back at me with eyes full of sadness and exhaustion, the same eyes I had seen in the mirror tonight. I traced the edge of the picture with my trembling finger. That day, on the bridge. I had gone there to breathe, to escape, to cry without being seen. Someone must have taken that photo when I wasn't looking. But who? And why? I tried to remember if I had seen anyone near me that day. Someone watching, someone following, but my memory felt blurred like the rain on the glass. I turned on the small lamp beside the couch, and its warm light filled the room with a soft glow that made the shadows stretch across the walls. I sat down slowly, my body heavy, my spirit exhausted. I didn't know if I should call someone, maybe the police, maybe an old friend, maybe no one at all. I knew how these things looked, how stories like this sounded when they reached the ears of strangers. A man I barely knew had confessed his love. He had watched me for years. He believed I was part of his story. And now another man, someone from a past I wanted to forget, was searching for me too. It all sounded unreal, and yet it was happening. To me in my home on this stormy night. I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes for a moment. The sound of the wind slipped through the small cracks of the window, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and distant thunder. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heart still beating too fast. I told myself to breathe, to calm down, to stay present. But the fear kept growing, a soft, steady ache under my ribs. I opened my eyes again and looked around the apartment, noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The lock on the door that felt too thin, the curtain that didn't fully cover the window, the dark hallway outside that suddenly seemed endless. I stood up and walked to the door. I locked it, then checked it again, pulling it gently to make sure it wouldn't open icily. For the first time in years, my home didn't feel like home. I moved to the window and looked down at the street. The rain had slowed and a few people were walking under umbrellas, unaware of the storm inside my apartment. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing under one of them, still like a statue. My breath stopped. I leaned closer to the glass. But then a car passed, its headlights washing over the figure, and when the light faded, the person was gone. Maybe it was only my mind. Maybe it was a real shadow I didn't know anymore. I stepped away from the window and paced the room, trying to think clearly. The man who loved me too much said someone was looking for me. A stranger with my old photo. Someone who knew my name. Someone who promised to return. I felt my throat tighten again. I remembered nights long ago when I felt someone following me, a voice calling me in the dark, a letter that arrived without a sender, small things I had tried to forget. Maybe they had never been accidents. Maybe I had never truly escaped. I walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and took out a bottle of water. My hands were shaking as I twisted the cap. I drank slowly, trying to calm the dryness inside my throat. I leaned on the counter and whispered into the empty room that everything would be okay. But even I didn't believe my own voice. The fear wasn't the loud kind. It was quiet, heavy, patient. It sat with me in the kitchen, followed me to the living room, pressed its cold hand on the back of my neck. I went to the bathroom to change out of my wet clothes. The warm air from the small heater helped a little, but not enough. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red, my cheeks pale, my hair stuck to my skin. I didn't look like myself. I looked like a memory of someone else, someone tired, someone hunted, someone who didn't know where the danger was coming from. When I returned to the living room, I noticed something on the floor near the door, a small piece of paper folded twice. I knelt down slowly, my heart pounding again. The paper was wet on one corner, probably from the rain that had blown inside earlier. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. Inside, written in small, messy handwriting, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. "I'll find you soon." My breath caught in my chest and the room spun for a second. I dropped the paper on the floor and stepped back, my hand covering my mouth. I didn't know how it got there. I didn't know who left it. I didn't know how long it had been inside my apartment. But I knew one thing with painful, terrifying clarity. Someone had been close. Too close. Close enough to leave a message inside my home without me noticing. I stared at the note on the floor for a long time, unable to move, unable to breathe. The words felt like hands closing around my throats, low, cold, certain. I picked it up again with trembling fingers and read it once more, hoping I had imagined it, hoping the letters would change, hoping the message would disappear. But it didn't. "I'll find you soon." My legs almost gave out beneath me. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I sat on the floor, the note still in my hand. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, and the room felt like it was shrinking around me. I tried to think of every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. I'd been in the living room the whole time after he left. No one could have come in without me hearing, unless the note had been there before, unless someone had left it earlier, maybe even before he arrived. A cold wave washed over me at the thought. I pressed my fingertips to my temples, trying to steady my mind. The storm outside finally began to calm, but the quiet felt worse. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting. I stood slowly, my body heavy like my bones were filled with sand. I checked the door again, pulling the handle, checking the lock, sliding the chain. My fingers hesitated when I touched the small gap between the door and the floor. Could someone have slid the note under it earlier without me noticing? It was possible. But even that possibility didn't calm me. Because if someone had been close enough to do that, they had been standing right outside my home, close enough to hear my footsteps, my breath, my fear. I walked to each window, pulling the curtains closed, pressing my palms against the cold glass. The street looked empty now, the lights reflecting on the wet pavement, the night still and heavy. Every shadow looked like it was hiding someone. Every parked car looked like it had eyes. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer, scanning the street for any sign, any movement, anything out of place. But the silence was complete. I backed away from the window and walked to the center of the room, hugging my arms around myself. I didn't want to call him back. The thought of seeing him again made my stomach twist with fear. But being alone felt worse. And the note on the floor was a reminder that someone else had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. My fingers hovered over his name, but I couldn't press it. Not yet. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anyone. I went to the kitchen and turned on the light. The warm glow made the room look smaller but safer somehow. I opened the cabinets, one by one, checking if anything looked out of place. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just needed to feel like I was in control of something. The dishes were untouched. The glasses were still in their rows. The drawer with the cutlery was the same as always. I checked the bathroom next, then my bedroom, opening the closet, checking under the bed, even though I knew how ridiculous it was. Fear makes you do things you never thought you would do. When I returned to the living room, I saw the note again on the floor where I had dropped it. It looked small, harmless, just a piece of paper, but it held more weight than anything else in the room. I picked it up gently and placed it on the table next to the photo. The two things together felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My past and my present were colliding, and I was standing in the middle of the crash. I sat on the couch and pulled my knees close to my chest. I tried to remember everyone from my past who could have written that note. Every face, every voice, every shadow. But some memories were blurry, like they belonged to another life. I remembered a night years ago when I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my door. I remembered a man's voice calling my name softly. I remembered the fear, the confusion, the way I had pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying out. I thought it was just my imagination then. I thought it was the pain, the grief, the loneliness playing tricks on me. But maybe it wasn't. A soft knock echoed through the apartment, so light I almost thought I imagined it. I froze, every muscle in my body going still. The knock came again, gentle, slow, almost polite. My breath stopped. I stood up slowly, my eyes fixed on the door. The air felt thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. I took a step forward, then stopped. Another knock. A whisper of sound that made my heart pound against my ribs. I asked who it was. My voice cracked, barely leaving my lips. There was no answer. A step closer, my hand reaching for the peephole. My fingers shook as I looked through it. The hallway was empty, completely empty. No footsteps, no shadow, no one standing outside my door. But I had heard the knock. I backed away from the door, my whole body trembling. I grabbed the phone from the table and held it tightly. I didn't call him. I didn't call anyone. I just stood there, listening to the silence on the other side of the door, waiting for another knock that didn't come. Instead, something else happened. A soft sound from the balcony, almost like someone brushing against the glass. The sound from the balcony was so soft I almost convinced myself it was the wind. Almost. But something inside me, something deep and old and instinctive, told me the truth before my mind could accept it. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my breath trapped in my chest. I stared at the glass door leading to the balcony, waiting, listening, hoping it was nothing, praying it was nothing. But then it came again. A faint brush, like fingertips sliding across the glass. My heart dropped to my stomach. I forced my legs to move, slow and careful, as if any sudden motion would make whatever was outside react. I reached for the lamp and turned it off, plunging the room into a dim, shadowy glow. I didn't want whoever or whatever was out there to see me clearly. The storm had calmed almost completely now, leaving only the humid smell of rain in the air. The quiet felt unnatural, heavy, full. I stepped closer to the glass door, each step making the floor creak softly under my feet. I didn't touch the curtain. I didn't open the door. I just stopped a few inches away and waited. My pulse was loud, too loud, beating in my ears like a warning. The night outside looked still, but the darkness felt alive. I leaned forward slowly, trying to see without revealing my face. But before my eyes reached the glass, another sound echoed through the apartment, a soft vibration on the table. My phone. I turned sharply, my breath catching. The screen lit up the room with a pale glow. A message. My hands shook as I picked it up, my fingers trembling so much I almost dropped it. When I saw the sender, my stomach knotted. No name, no number, just unknown. And below it, a single sentence. Why did you let him in? I took one step back, then another, my entire body shaking. My breath broke in my throat as I stared at the message. Whoever had written it, they knew. Not only that he was here, not only that he had stood inside my home. They knew something deeper, something old, something I had tried so hard to bury. I wanted to reply. I wanted to ask who they were, how they knew, what they wanted. But fear held my fingers still. Then another message appeared. I saw him leave. My knees almost gave out. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the phone so tightly my fingers turned white. I looked toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst through it at any moment. The apartment felt too quiet, too still, too small. I glanced toward the balcony again, but I didn't dare move the curtain. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. Every part of me screamed to hide. Then the phone vibrated again. Don't lock the door. A cold sweat washed down my back. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from crying out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should call the police. I didn't know if I should run. I didn't know if he, the man who claimed to love me, was still somewhere nearby. Every option felt wrong. Every choice felt dangerous. I read the message again. Don't lock the door. I looked at the door. It was locked. The chain was still across. The key was still turned. And that simple fact made the message even worse, because it meant the person texting me wasn't just outside watching. They wanted to get inside. I forced myself to move. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I stepped toward the bedroom, needing to hide, needing to think, needing to breathe. But before I reached the hallway, I heard another sound from the balcony, Not a brush this time. Not something soft or careful. A tap, slow, clear, intentional, like someone knocking on the glass. I froze again, the fear so strong it felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. The tap came again and again. A steady rhythm. Someone trying to get my attention. Someone trying to be heard. I held the phone tight in my hand as I turned my head toward the balcony door, moving only my eyes, afraid to make a sound. In the dim reflection of the glass, distorted by the darkness and the faint glow behind me, I thought I saw something. A shadow. The hint of a figure standing outside. I swallowed hard, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to think. Then my phone vibrated again. This time the message made the world around me tilt. Clara, open the curtain, I've been waiting a long time. I dropped my phone when I heard that floorboard creak. For a moment, everything inside me stopped. The sound was small, almost nothing, but it came from the hallway behind me, not from the balcony. I felt cold spread through my body, slow and deep, like ice under my skin. I did not want to turn around, I did not want to see. I wanted this to be a dream, a trick of my mind, a noise from the building. But I knew. I knew by the way the air changed, by the way my heart pounded, by the way my hands began to shake again. Someone was inside my home. It was not just a message on my phone anymore. I bent down slowly and picked up the phone with numb fingers. The screen was still on, the last message glowing in the dark room. I'm already inside. My throat tightened, took one careful breath, then another. I told myself I had two choices: freeze and wait, or move and fight for my life. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to move, step by step, away from the balcony and toward the middle of the room. I listened. At first there was nothing, then another soft sound. A second floorboard, a slow step. Someone was walking inside my hallway, coming closer. I looked toward the door of the bedroom corridor. The light in the living room was low, but I could see the dark frame of the hallway like an open mouth. I wanted to run to the front door, but to reach it, I would have to turn my back to that darkness, and I could not do it. I could not show my back to whoever was there. I took a small step sideways instead, moving closer to the table. My eyes did not leave the hallway. My fingers searched blindly until they touched the photo and the note. My past and my present sitting side by side. I picked up the note and closed it in my fist. I did not know why. Maybe because I wanted to hold something that proved I was not crazy, that this was really happening. "Clara," a voice called from the hallway. It was soft, low, almost gentle, but it cut through me like a knife. It was a voice I had heard before, in another time, in another life, a voice I had prayed to forget. My knees almost gave out. Memories flashed in my mind like broken images. A hospital corridor, a long night, a promise I never agreed to make. My breath became shallow, my chest tight. I whispered his name before I could stop myself. Daniel. The shadow in the hallway moved, stepped closer, just enough for me to see his outline. Tall, thin, shoulders slightly bent, like someone who had carried too much weight for too long. His face was still hidden in the dark, but I could see the pale line of his hands. He took another slow step toward me, like he was walking through water. "You remember?" he said. There was a strange smile in his voice. "I was afraid you had erased me completely." I swallowed hard and forced myself to stand straight. I asked him how he got in, but part of me already knew. The note, the knock, the balcony, the moment I went to change my clothes. The small window I thought was closed. All the little things I never checked because I believed I was safe. He said the door was not the only way. He said he knew this building better than I thought, that he had been here many times before, watching, waiting, listening to my life through the walls. My stomach turned. I told him he needed to leave. My voice shook, but the words were clear. He tilted his head and I saw the faint shine of his eyes in the dim light. "Leave?" he repeated. "After all these years? After everything you took from me?" His voice grew sharper, but he still walked slowly, as if this moment was something he wanted to savor. I stepped back, my spine hitting the edge of the couch. There was nowhere else to go. I told him I did not take anything from him. I said it again and again, even as old memories began to push through my mind. The hospital room. The night my world ended. The man who sat in the corner watching me cry. The way he held my hand when no one else was there. The promise he said I made, when I was too broken to know what I was saying. You said I saved you, he whispered now, taking another step. You said you would never forget me, but you did. You left. You disappeared. You started a new life like I never existed. Tears burned my eyes. I shook my head. I told him I was not myself that night, that I was in shock, that I had lost everything, that my words were not promises. They were pain. He laughed softly, a laugh that made the hair on my arms stand up. You don't get to decide that now, he said. You don't get to erase me. He was closer now. I could see part of his face, the tired lines, the eyes too bright, the mouth twisted between hurt and anger. He looked like a man who had fallen into a hole and decided to live there instead of climbing out. I searched the room with my eyes, looking for anything I could use. A lamp, a heavy object, something. My fingers brushed the edge of the table again. I felt the base of the lamp under my hand. I kept my voice low and steady. I asked him what he wanted from me. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that terrified me more than his anger. Hope. I want what you promised, he said. I want you. I want the life we were supposed to have. The life you ran away from. My chest tightened. I told him I never promised him a life. I told him I never loved him. I told him that whatever he built in his head was not real. His face changed. The hope cracked. The hurt turned to something darker. You shouldn't have said that, he whispered. You shouldn't keep choosing other people over me. He took another step forward. At that same moment, a new sound exploded in the hallway outside my front door. A loud, hard knock. Not soft. Not polite. Urgent. Then a familiar voice calling my name. Clara, open the door. It was him, Marcus. Daniel's head snapped toward the door. The emotion on his face twisted into pure rage. For the first time, his calm steps turned sharp. You let him in, he said, his voice low and shaking. You let him in, but not me. You gave him what was mine. He started moving faster now, crossing the space between us in a few long strides. Panic shot through me like fire. I grabbed the lamp with both hands and pulled it from the table, the cord snapping from the wall with a spark. I held it up between us, my arms shaking. Don't come closer, I said. My voice finally broke free. Please, don't. His eyes were wild now, full of pain and anger and something broken beyond repair. For a moment, I thought he would reach for me. For a moment, I thought it would all end there, in my small living room, with the storm still wet on the windows. But the door shook again. Marcus called my name louder, his fist hitting the wood. Clara, are you there? Open the door. Daniel's attention snapped back to the sound, his jaw clenched. He doesn't belong here, he hissed. He doesn't belong in your story. Then he moved, turning toward the hallway, toward the door, toward the man outside who thought he was my protector. I did not think. I just moved. I swung the lamp with all the strength I had. It hit Daniel's shoulder and part of his face, sending him stumbling sideways with a cry of pain. The lamp slipped from my hands and crashed to the floor. I ran past him, my body shaking, my feet barely feeling the ground. He grabbed for me, his fingers catching my arm, but I twisted, pulling free with a scream. I reached the door and pulled the chain with shaking fingers, then turned the key. The door opened just as Daniel's hand closed around my wrist again. Marcus burst into the apartment. For a second, everything was chaos. Daniel pulled me back. Marcus grabbed my other arm. Both men shouted, their voices overlapping. I could barely breathe. I could barely see through the tears and fear. But I felt one thing clearly. This was my moment, my only chance. I tore my hands free and stumbled out into the hallway. Help! I screamed, my voice echoing down the building. Please, someone help! Doors opened, lights turned on. People's faces appeared, confused, afraid, watching. At the same time, Marcus pushed past me and went after Daniel inside the apartment, shouting at him to stop, to leave, to get out. Someone called the police. I heard it through the noise, through the pounding in my ears. Minutes later, but it felt like hours, strong hands pulled Daniel away. There was shouting, struggling, then the sharp click of metal. Handcuffs. His eyes met mine one last time as they pulled him through the hallway. There was no anger in them now, only a strange, broken sadness. "You said I saved you," he whispered as they took him away. "But you never wanted to save me." I stood against the wall, my body shaking, my lungs burning, my cheeks wet with tears. Marcus tried to come closer, to touch my shoulder, to calm me down. I stepped away, could not let anyone close in that moment. Not him, not anyone. Two men had entered my life in ways I never asked for. One obsessed. One protecting. Both crossing lines I never gave permission to cross. That night, after the police took my statement, and the neighbors closed their doors and the building went quiet again, I sat alone on the floor of my living room. The broken lamp lay near the table. The note was still in my fist, wrinkled and wet. The photo of me on the bridge was on the floor, the glass of the frame cracked right through my face. I picked it up slowly and ran my thumb over the broken line. I thought about Daniel, about the way pain had twisted him into someone dangerous. I thought about Marcus, about the way protection had turned into control and watching and fear. I thought about myself, about all the years I had lived like a ghost in my own story, letting other people decide who I was to them. For the first time in a long time, I did not cry. The next morning, when the sun finally rose and light touched the walls of my apartment, I packed a small bag. I called the building manager and told him I was moving out. I changed the number on my phone. I blocked both men. I gave the police everything I could remember. I made an appointment with someone to talk about the years I had tried to erase. Not for them, not to fix their broken hearts, but to fix my own. Sometimes late at night, I still hear a soft knock in my mind. Sometimes I still feel afraid to open my own door. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder when I walk home. Fear is not something you turn off. It lives in you like a scar. Quiet, deep, permanent. But I also learned something. I learned that opening the door to the wrong person can change your life. And I learned that one day, if you are brave enough, you can close it again. I let him in. And I will spend the rest of my life learning how to keep myself safe. But now, when I stand in front of a door, with my hand on the handle, I remember that the first yes I give has to be to myself, i.e. that, finally, is a promise I intend to keep.